Just for context, I'm a teenage female and still attending school, so I work the same night shifts on Friday and midday weekend shifts every week. Around 5 months ago, I served a man who had come in with his family during the weekend. He was really rude to me and my coworker, constantly demanding extra stuff, claiming the food wasn't fresh, and was also very strict to his family. He yelled at his kids to stand in line and walk to wash their hands, yelling at them if they talked while eating. When he was beginning to leave, he randomly came back to me, guiding his crying daughter to tell me thank you for the food. She was clearly upset and embarrassed, trying to hide her face. I didn't see him again until maybe 5 weeks ago. Every Friday when I work the night shift by myself, he comes in to buy food but eats in the store by himself. My other coworker leaves 2 hours before closing, and all I have to do is the last bit of orders and then clean with the store closed and then the lights off. Each time he was being overly nice, but it felt so performative. Like he would smile, give me a compliment, and then his face would drop and wait for my reaction. He creeped me out, but it wasn't any reason for concern until 2 weeks ago. He ate inside again and left. Maybe an hour later, I closed up the store and then cleaned, finishing up at around 11:30 p.m. I left through the back car park and went to the strip of stores across the road since I wanted to go to the bank and further down the street the laundromat to wash the aprons since no one had bothered to do it before. When going to the bank, I saw the man again, waiting outside the bank on his phone. Didn't think anything of it. I saw him before and it made sense to me that he was there. I walked right past him without acknowledging him down the street until I noticed him following me. Each time I stopped, so would he. If I randomly turned or crossed the road, he was still there. He always kept a gap between us. I was also doing random stuff to see if he would do the same. When I finally reached the laundromat, he stood in front of the door just watching me. Not really knowing what to do since the laundromat is a long hallway and not wanting to be face to face with him when I came out of the entry, I booked it for the fire escape on the opposite end, which led to an alleyway surrounded by the sides of apartments. It took me ages to walk out of the alleyway until I finally reached the street where I could walk around the block of stores back to the bank and diagonal to the car park. I looked down the street again and I didn't see him. I told my coworkers and boss about this. I now no longer have the night shift and work Fridays after 4 p.m., and my coworkers have been keeping a lookout, but I haven't seen him since. I've been busy dealing with the wake of a family tragedy since this all happened, but now that things are returning to the new normal, I figured it's a good time to share. So this is what I thought was a nightmare. First, I'll describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream, and it feels like a clear memory just because of how scary it was. I was about 4 or 5 years old, perhaps 6 at most, and my twin brother and I had a bunk bed in a room at the furthest end of the house where we grew up in. The nightmare had me in my bed looking out the window to see a red sky, the kind it gets in the early dawn hours before sunrise, but light still colors the sky. The next and only other thing I remembered in this nightmare is that a man with crazy blue-colored eyes and a bald head appears at the window and stares right at me. The nightmare ends there, but I remember just how much I screamed and screamed about it. I don't know where my brother was at the time when I woke up screaming, and the only thing I could remember from when I woke up was having my mom come and get me and calm me down as she took me to her bedroom down the hall. I only remember that so well because I wondered where my dad was at the time. Fast forward to this May, and my father is in the hospital in the country he lives in Colombia, and my twin brother and our older sister are staying in a hotel about a 5-minute walk away from the hospital he's staying in the ICU at. One day, after a long day of being there for Dad and for the extended family, my siblings and I return to the hotel and sit together to have a couple of beers and just try to relax after all of that. We start discussing things, just trying to unwind, but somehow the discussion of nightmares and dreams come up, and I bring up the above story. Well, without missing a beat, my sister straight up explains that had really happened. that some guy really did look through my window and that she remembers the whole thing. My sister, who's 5 years older than my brother and I, so this would make her 9 to 10 years old, had her bedroom adjacent to the bedroom that my brother and I shared. Her room faced our lawn and street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and their driveway with a very low fence between the two houses. While she didn't get into too much detail about the days before this nightmare and event, she said that she had been followed by a bald man in a truck as she had rode her bike home with some friends a couple of times before. The day immediately before this nightmare was no different, but the man this time actually drove right past the house. At the time, she was a latchkey kid since my brother and I had to go to a special school about 45 minutes away from our hometown for a speech impediment that many twins have, and my mom had to pick us up rather than be home for my sister after school. But she was never home alone for more than an hour. That afternoon and evening was pretty normal as she remembers it. My dad came home from his job. He worked as a part-time cop and worked in a local hardware store. We then all had dinner, did homework, played, and did the usual family things before bed. That night around 12 to 1 a.m., this bald-headed dude had parked down the street at a small industrial park and walked up to our house and tried to get in through my sister's window, which woke her up, and she then screamed when she saw the man nearly opening the window as it wasn't locked. My dad stormed in and tried to shove the guy out or tried to hit him with the nightstick he had. My sister doesn't remember exactly, and this caused the guy to run off, but only for a short time, as he came back a moment later to try and get into the window in my room. He tried opening the window, but it was locked because my mom didn't want my brother and I to open it because our bed was right up against it. My sister said I screamed as loud as I could, and my mom went in to get my brother and I while my dad tried to go after him by running out of the front door to chase him, but to no avail, as the guy hauled ass right through our backyard. The way our backyard was situated had it backed up right against a small rail yard that is part of the aforementioned small industrial park down the street from us. Between our small neighborhood and that rail yard was a very good amount of very dense trees that always made the backyards very, very dark. So my dad didn't want to get attacked by him there. So instead he went back inside to our house, called the police. Then he called our elderly neighbor to make sure they were okay while our mom took care of us kids. This is all my sister could remember from that night herself, as this was a very long time ago. Neither of us could recall anything else after that either, and the story just sort of stops right there. My father sadly passed away in the hospital, so we aren't able to ask him, and given all of that, none of us have really thought to ask our mom yet, but maybe I'll ask her soon. The story goes back to the 90s. I was 7 or 8 and going home from school, a 5-minute walk in a safe district, but there was something waiting for me on my way home that day. I remember a man, a smile, a big hand reaching to me to shake my small one, and 2 meters away there was another man leaning on a car with its door open. I did shake his hand, and I remember him not wanting to let go of my hand. He had started asking questions about school and teachers. I was answering the questions while trying to liberate my hand. Then out of nowhere, my best friend in elementary school of that year showed up, shouted my name, and stood not too close but not far away from watching us. Then the man stopped smiling, let loose of my hand, and went to the car looking frustrated. My friend looked scared and serious. I totally forgot all about this 2 minutes of my life because I didn't know what tragedy I escaped. Then somehow the memories re-emerged after 20 years, and I then understood that it was a kidnapping attempt. Last night I awoke to the unsettling noise of loud banging and my dog's frantic barking. Living alone with my girlfriend, we have grown accustomed to our neighbors' domestic disputes, and I have to call the police often. I stumbled to the bathroom, as the walls there are thin and separated our duplex from theirs. As I approached the bathroom door, the entire house was dark, and a tall shadow was in my bathtub. I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I'm incredibly nearsighted, so I struggled to discern whether the shadow was merely the shower curtain or what it was. Then the shadow spoke. I don't know what he said, but the gut-wrenching panic I felt is still fresh. I screamed and fled back to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My girlfriend, now awake and terrified, joined me as I dialed the police. They instructed me to lock the door, but my bedroom doesn't have one. With the banging growing louder and more aggressive, I braced myself against the door, praying that help would arrive in time. To my relief, the police arrived swiftly, in only 5 minutes. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, I found that they had dragged him naked from the bathtub because he had been trying to shower. They were questioning him on my couch while he was handcuffed. He was apparently incredibly drunk and had just wandered into the wrong house. And this was the one night that we forgot to lock the doors. Gotta love it. I came here to tell my story because there are people that go through these types of relationships who are maybe still healing, but I also need some advice myself. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and when I was 14, I really liked older guys, and not guys who were 1 year older than me, but I mean like 3 to 4 years older. That's when I met my ex. He was 17 at the time, and he was a really sweet guy, until he'd started opening up about his mental health and drug addiction. Don't get me wrong, I don't judge him for being mentally unstable, but he never took his prescription and he just threw tantrums all day, verbally abused me, and overall didn't even care about me. I was with him for 2 years until one day he finally blocked me, basically ending our relationship, and I never heard from him again. Until 2 months ago, that is. I came home from school one day and I looked into the mailbox because I saw an envelope. It was unusual for us to receive envelopes unless it was a bill, but it wasn't an envelope for bills. It was one meant for letters. I put it in my purse and went inside the house. I went into my room after and I said hi to my mom and then opened the envelope. There was no return address or anything like that, but my name on the letter caught my attention. I never received letters from anyone, and I was worried to see a signature that I'd recognize on it. I started reading the letter, well, hardly because the writing was awful, but the person who sent it was telling me how they regret letting me go and that they want me back. I thought that one of my friends was playing a stupid prank on me, so I brushed it off and put it in my drawer, just laughing about the situation. Later that night, I was about to go to sleep when an unknown number showed up on my screen. I looked at the screen confused because I rarely ever receive such weird calls from unknown numbers. I didn't really want to pick up, but I thought that maybe it was one of my friends trying to pull one of their pranks on me as usual. I picked up and I heard breathing.
Hello?
I said. No answer.
Beatrice, are you this bored that you want to pull pranks on me?
Still no answer, just heavy breathing from the other end. All of a sudden, I heard his voice.
Who's Beatrice?
My eyes were wide open and I hung up. I stared at the ceiling in disbelief and I put my phone on silent mode and just went to sleep. I didn't think for 1 second that this phone call was about to be the beginning of my biggest nightmare. I woke up the next morning with several calls from that unknown number, and I got a little scared. I opened my phone and saw messages from the same person telling me to pick up and to just talk to them. I tried to ignore it, but the calls and messages continued even after I got to school. When I was outside the school gates and smoking a cigarette with my friend, I got a call again. I answered and gave an upset answer.
Dude, who the hell are you? Why are you calling me?
The person sat in silence for a few seconds, then said my friend's name. They heard their name and they asked me who the hell I was on the phone with.
You're with who I think you are, aren't you? Of course you are. I can see you.
I looked around and didn't see anyone other than my schoolmates. There were only 6 people around us, and nobody was on a call or anything. I got creeped out and hung up. I eventually recognized the voice, and it was my ex's. I told my friend that he kept calling me and texting me from an unknown number since last night, and that I didn't know what to do. She said that I can't really do anything about it and that I should just ignore the calls. But as time went on, I started to get more letters, sometimes even flowers right next to the fence of my home. For context, my ex was from another city, and I never told him where I lived. He knew what school I went to, but never which class I was in. Then I started to get single roses once a week on my desk when I got to school. My classmates told me that they never saw the person who brought me the roses because they were there by the time they got to class. I was super paranoid. I started to receive pictures of my friends and I outside the school gate, sometimes even when I was alone. I was shitting my pants whenever I saw the unknown number pop up on the screen with a picture attached to the message. I finally had enough one day, and I called his number that was saved in my phone. I called him, but he never picked up. I started texting him on the apps that I didn't get blocked on, and I told him to stop or I'll contact his boss and complain about his creepy behavior, and that I'd even make fake complaints about his service at work so that he'll get fired. He really needed the job, so he left me alone for like a week. But then I started to see him on the street, in public transport, and outside my school. Mind you, this dude lived in another country by the time we broke up, and only came back when he started texting me again. I asked some of his friends about the time he got back, and they told me that he came back to our home country the same day I started getting the calls. I could barely leave the house after I found out that he knew my school schedule, and I always asked one of my classmates who lived nearby to pick me up with their car on our way to school. One day I wasn't so lucky, and my classmate who used to drive me to school was sick and couldn't show up, so I had to take the bus that day. When I got on my bus, I saw his blonde wavy hair, and I froze. I literally wanted to cry and didn't know how to get out of the bus without him getting off at the same stop as me. In my country, we aren't supposed to talk to the driver while he's driving, but I had no other choice than to ask him to not let him out of the bus. I explained the situation, and he was thankfully very understanding, and he didn't let him off the bus. My ex was banging on the glass doors and screaming to be let off at the stop, but the driver just kept the door shut and drove off. I sighed in relief and started crying while I was waiting for another bus to come. It's been a month since school ended, and I haven't seen him after that, but I'm really scared that he might come back when school starts. The police won't do anything about it, and I even started getting threatening letters 2 weeks ago. I carry a pocket knife with me whenever I go out, and I even changed my phone number, but I don't know what else I can do. I also want to mention that he has a twin brother. I knew this, but I never thought that maybe his brother is also involved in this. I'm actually starting to think that they're in on this together, and this is why I see him so often. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still can't shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all of the staring from the people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and then introduced himself as the groom's friend, Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dance started, they started playing Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore I left it there. I was tired and I thought I had just left it in my car, so I went into the parking lot and into my car to look for it, and I found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird because I really thought that I had brought it inside, but at that point it was pretty late in the night, so I didn't think too much of it. I danced some more, and I noticed that Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said he had gone home because he wasn't feeling too good. Pretty soon, I felt pretty sick too, so I said bye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like something had dug down from the trunk. I took out my keys and looked back there, and that's when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said that he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily got home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him and that she had no idea that he would do something like that. I haven't stepped out of my house since because I'm worried that if I do, he'll be waiting for me like he was before. So I want to give a little update. The last couple of days have been kind of crazy, so I haven't had the chance to look, but thank you all for your advice that I really wish I would have known about earlier. Unfortunately, my address was on my ID, as I now learned Anthony took photos of it. Anthony and the groom aren't exactly friends, but they know each other well enough for him to be invited to the wedding. After that whole fiasco, the groom tried to text Anthony about it, but got no response. Anthony showed up at my job and lurked around the parking lot before he ran off when he saw security. He left me a note on my windshield that just said, "I'm watching." Security at my job has been notified about him, so hopefully I'm safe there. I was told by other people that went to the wedding that he was introducing himself as my boyfriend and that he was planning on proposing. I'm currently trying to file a restraining order against him, and I feel horrified. He lives in my city and he knows where I live, so I'm staying at my aunt's house as I speak. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to provide an update. A guy I used to work with really wanted to take me hunting. I work at a big retail store as a self-checkout host. Most of my days are spent walking laps and listening to customers saying things like, "I don't work here," or "Why aren't you on the register?" I understood their frustrations. Usually there would be 2 or 3 of us at the self-checkout and maybe 2 manned registers open. Well, we got a new guy in. We'll call him Terry. Terry always wore a mask as it was 2021 and COVID was still COVIDing. I was training him, telling him to stock candy in bags. He would ask questions anyone would ask. If I'm in school, if I have a girlfriend. I lived in a small city/big town that had a good college. Students from all over the country would come and usually wound up within the prisons or retail. He usually asked me the same questions. I told him no on both accounts. He then asked me if I ever went hunting. We had a lot of woods and a big forest around the town. I replied, "No, I don't like guns." He then said that he'd have to take me one day. A few days go by and he's over on my side again. He asks if I have my family in town, and if they aren't, do they live close? I live 3 doors down from my mom. He starts talking about hunting again, how he was out with his buddies and started using pack tactics where they would box in the prey and then finish it off. Weird for deer, seeing as they flee at the first thought of a noise. He's off for a few days because new hires have problems getting hours for the first 3 weeks. I talked to one of my coworkers and they tell me that he asks a lot about me. The next time I see him, his questions are very telling. How tall would you say you are? How much do you weigh? How well do you know the woods past so-and-so street? I'm a big guy at 6 foot and 300 pounds, and when he brought up hunting again, a creepy thought would send chills down my spine. Come on, man, you'd like it. Just some good old boys shooting the shit late at night in the middle of the woods. Then the real fun starts right before dawn. They won't know what hit them. The mask hid most of his face, but I could see a rise when he smiled. I don't know why I thought that would be a great way to convince someone. Other than feeling like they were about to hump me, it sounded like I would have been bored as hell before. I must have made a face or something, because then he turned and walked away quickly. I told a couple of coworkers about it, but that was his last day. I never saw him again, and I hope I never do. There's the street dog near my college campus that I see every day. It is one of the older dogs, so it's always sleeping and very calm in general. I live very near to the college, and my friend and I usually go for a walk late at night after dinner. Tonight was no different, and we were walking around the same route. It's a residential area, so we've never felt unsafe since there are always college students or other families out on the road walking around. We were on our third lap, and this dog was sitting at its usual spot. While we were walking past it, I was gushing about how cute it is and was clearly distracted. Suddenly, my friend said there was a weird car behind us. I turned around to see there was in fact a car driving at a really slow speed. The car pivoted towards us, which made me think that maybe it wanted to park where we were walking and it just might be a random family. As I was about to convey these assumptions to my friend, we heard a dog barking and turned around to see it chasing after the car. Both my friend and I are scared of dogs, so she stood behind me hoping I would save her, but right when I turned around, it was the same street dog from before. I knew right away it wouldn't harm us. The car suddenly sped past us, and the dog didn't chase us or anything, instead just stood on guard. When we recovered from the shock of it all, we both had the same realization that the dog might have just saved us. We still don't know if that car had any evil intentions, but the way it sped right when the dog started barking, the timing of it all was just way too bizarre. Plus, it was driving so slow that both of us didn't even realize until it was way too close to us. Needless to say, that dog will be getting extra pets from me every time I see it. This just happened to me like 30 minutes ago, so I'm rather shaken up. A friend and I were walking down the street back to my apartment. It was dark out since it's late here. As we were walking on the sidewalk past a dark parking lot, a woman approached us out of the shadows. She was waiting there for us to approach her, so I thought it was strange. There was also another woman walking alone about half a block ahead of us that passed by her. She didn't stop this woman. She stops us by looking me in the eye and then saying, "Excuse me, I think you're so beautiful and I want to know your name." I thought this was weird, so my friend and I just looked at each other and both just said, Then she said, "I promise I'm not being weird." Still, we didn't answer and kinda just stood there in shock. The woman got more urgent with her pleas, then said, "Please, I just really want to know your name." And finally, I kinda just snapped out of it and then said, "No thank you," and then we walked away. I turned back to see where she went because I got such a bad gut feeling about this, and I saw her talking to a man in a car across the street. They were both looking at us. Then she got in and they sped off. Here's what I think happened. The man with the woman in tow were on a prowl to find a woman to sex traffic. They saw us walking from way down the street and then drove up the street to try and get into position before we walked over there. We didn't notice because it was dark and there was a lot of trees and the street was long. He told her to try and get me in the car, and she tried but failed. I want to know what you guys think though. Do you guys think this was a sex trafficking scheme to try and get us in the car? Why would she be so urgent and aggressive about my name? What was that man doing there? Should I be worried they'll come back? I live about a block from there, so I'm still very scared. I go to the gym rather late. I'm a parent and a college student, so late night gym sessions work out well for me. I once got out of the gym around 12 a.m., stopped at a gas station to put some air into my tires, and I noticed a man kinda eyeing me from afar. Then he came up to me offering to finish for me. I declined. He then went on saying that I have a good figure and that I was really pretty. I thanked him, then tried to go about my business. He keeps talking, and he mentions how I remind him of his girlfriend who died a couple of years ago, and how he's in Arizona trying to get his shit together. There was a red car parked next to me, and it was full of stuff in the back like someone lived in it. He said it was his and he was renting a little room for his business, but the landlord found out he was living in it and not doing business, so he got kicked out. He said it was full of books and that he loved reading and I don't know what else. He said that he doesn't have anywhere to go, and he can't go anywhere because he doesn't have plates on his car. He asked if I would follow him back to the office so the police would avoid reading his plates, since around this time there's a bunch of them. I already knew this was a major red flag, but I was raised as a people pleaser and I couldn't say no. After I said yes, I just knew I had made a mistake and I tried to turn back. He said it's fine, that it's just down the street and that it'll be quick. I follow him and we get to the office. It's in a dark alley, no one was around, and there were no street lights. He tried to talk when he got out of his car, and I kept my windows rolled up with a small crack, just enough for him and I to hear each other, but not so much that he could reach inside, and I kept my doors locked. He then asked if I wanted to come inside and see his books that he bragged about so much and how they helped him cope with his girlfriend's death. He then opened the door to his office and he tried to convince me that there wasn't anyone there, that it's safe. But all I saw was one exit to a small ass room and he was standing right in front of it. I did see the books, but it wasn't enough to convince me. He said that he would bring them outside, but they're too heavy. I declined and said no, that I won't be going in there with him. But he kept trying to talk me into it, saying he's not going to do anything to me. He just wants to show me his books in his office. I declined again and said I would be leaving. He then stopped, was quiet for a bit, then said, "You know what, you're smart." After that, I sped off and I never saw him again. I'm now at a phase in my life where I say no to anyone and I'm always armed. I realized that I did put myself in that situation, and I also thank myself for being smart enough to get the hell out of it. I just wanted to share and spread awareness. I was at Walmart today with my wife and our newborn. As we were nearing the exit, I had noticed a younger woman in her 30s waiting and making eye contact with me, waiting around with an older man who looked to be in his 50s. She was giving off heavy meth vibes, and he was just disheveled. For whatever reason, they didn't pass the vibe, so I had my eyes on a swivel, and as we walked back to our car, they followed us down to our car, but a few paces behind. Still too far to approach. I put the baby and groceries in the car and closed everything, and the man ended up fumbling with his keys, as if to try and find his car. I was sufficiently on my nerves at this point, so I looped around with the car to see where they'd parked, and it turned out they were 4 lanes over. They then got into a car that was already running but parked with out-of-state plates, Vermont, and we're in North Carolina, which makes the key fumbling by the gentleman really out of character. Am I just being paranoid, or is this some sort of thing that happens? Or maybe it's just new parent creeps. I'd really like to know everyone's thoughts. Also, I did have our groceries in the bottom of the stroller. Maybe they wanted to steal those? This was also 2 p.m. at a busy Walmart in the Triangle area. I don't know. All I know is they really gave me the creeps. One day I stopped at the Burger King around 6 in the morning on my way to work. I parked in front and got out of the car. I pretty much always keep a level of situational awareness wherever I go, and didn't see anyone else walking around the parking lot. Maybe 10 to 15 seconds after I walked into the Burger King, a man in sunglasses came in after me. It was as if he had come out of nowhere, but I didn't pay that much mind at the time. I ordered some coffee and hash browns and waited by the counter. The man then approached me.
"Hey, is that your car over there?"
He gestured out the window of my car. Yeah.
"Where are you headed?"
To the university." My first instinct was to lie. I was actually headed to my job off campus, but I was already feeling weirded out by the encounter, and I didn't want to tell him where I worked.
Well, do you think you could give me a ride to Watershed Drive?
The street that he mentioned just so happened to be on the way to the university. How convenient. I gave him a good look. He still had his sunglasses on. Maybe he just forgot to take them off? It was rather odd he was wearing sunglasses in the first place, as it was a cloudy morning and the sun was just barely even out. Generic looking white guy, probably in his 40s or 50s. He was well groomed and neatly dressed, wearing a button-up shirt and a tan leather jacket, nice dress shoes. Didn't look like someone down on his luck at all, or at least not in so bad a situation he couldn't afford an Uber. Not that he really needed one. It was about a 20 to 30 minute walk. And call me cruel, but being a young female, I wasn't going to take my chances with letting an absolute stranger in my car. So of course I just said, "Nope, sorry." He nodded, shuffled around for a few more seconds, then left the Burger King without ordering anything. I found the whole encounter rather odd, but went about my day as usual. When I was about to leave work, I started thinking about it again. As I was heading to the university after work, and he knew I was a student there, and he knew exactly what car I had, and I was getting paranoid. It was a very distinct car, an electric blue PT Cruiser, so it stood out like a sore thumb. I convinced myself I was being unreasonable, getting so freaked out over a stranger asking for a ride, but my coworker agreed it was bizarre, and they suggested that I report it to the police just in case. At face value, it was a mundane interaction, but there were so many little factors that put me on alert. So I ended up calling the non-emergency line, prefacing it with, "It happened hours ago and it's probably nothing but," just to have it on the record. I was convinced they were going to tell me I was overreacting, but after I gave the description of the man in sunglasses, the dispatcher's tone immediately became urgent. She then scolded me for not reporting this earlier. She said she was going to send some troopers to the Burger King right away, but that it's probably too late by now. She told me to call immediately if I saw him again. To be honest, the dispatcher's reaction shook me more than the encounter itself, and it's why I still remember it so vividly years later. I wonder if my description perfectly matched someone they were looking for. I do regret not calling earlier, but I was convinced they'd tell me I was overreacting. I never did see him again, but to this day, I still wonder. So I recently got a job at Walmart in online grocery. And while I don't talk to customers nearly as much as cashiers or customer service, I do have to answer a lot of questions and direct people to items that they can't find. There are plenty of stupid people who don't look before asking me where something is, and the people who are just plain rude. But besides this one encounter, I haven't really had a problem with creepy men. At my past jobs, I was used to men making horrible comments about my body and body mods. But I guess at Walmart, there's always someone weirder walking around, so I don't get as many. It started at around noon when I went out on my first pick run of the day. I was in the soda aisle struggling to fit a box pack of beer into my cart when this guy came up and helped me. He was probably in his early to mid-20s. This kind of adds up to the creep factor because I only recently turned 18 and I haven't switched out my yellow name tag yet. He was a bigger guy, a bit shorter than me, and he was wearing a corn shirt. I thanked him for helping me and said I liked his shirt. He said it was no problem and then complimented my hair. No big deal, right? I pick up my handheld and get back to bagging soda and praying that I don't get sent on exceptions that night. Around 15 minutes later, I'm in the soup aisle crouched on the floor bagging 20 cans of Dinty Moore. Not my finest moment. Someone walks up behind me and then says, "Hey, excuse me," and I'm already excited to talk to them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, says excuse me whenever they want my attention. I stand up and turn around to see the same guy. He says he's been looking everywhere and he can't find the baking soda, and that he knows that he probably passed it, but he wants to make sure he's looking in the right area. The baking aisle is just a few over, and what a coincidence. The next thing I need for my run is bread flour. I tell him I'm heading over to the aisle the baking soda's in right now, and I'll show him where it is. He says thank you. I finish scanning the Dinty more, and we head over. It was a Tuesday and completely dead. Like I was seeing my coworkers more often than customers. We get to the baking aisle and I show him the baking soda before getting to picking out the bread flour. I had a lot to pick from in that aisle, so I was there for a good 10 minutes picking different items, and I couldn't help but notice that he put a tiny box of Arm & Hammer into his cart, and he was just standing there on his phone, occasionally looking at me. A little strange, but maybe he's texting someone and feeling a bit awkward that neither of us has left the aisle. Who knows? I finish my pick run, stage the totes into the cart, and bring it to the back. I go on 2 more runs before my first 15-minute break, and I catch a glimpse of Corn Guy every so often. I figure he's just having a hard time finding stuff because the Walmart I work at is massive, and continue on with my day. I go into the break room to eat the salad that I had in the fridge and drink a cherry Pepsi while getting the good gossip from one of the guys from customer service, and life is good. For a second, I thought I saw Corn Guy walk past the door, but I figured it was just an employee wearing the same shirt and didn't think of it again until later. My manager tells me to do 3 more pick runs before I go to the back to start dispensing orders, and I then head out on a produce run, easily one of the worst types, as the produce section is super confusing and always crazy busy. I get to the produce section and start doing my thing, when I then see Corn Guy standing next to the corn stand. I laugh to myself for a second before realizing that it's 1:30 a.m. at this point, and this guy has been at Walmart for at least an hour and a half. There are only 3 things in his cart. I try not to look in his direction so he doesn't try to talk to me, and get back to bagging onions and weighing apples. At this point, I'm getting some serious weirdo vibes from this guy. He walks up to me and says hi. I say hi back and I ask him if he needs anything. He proceeds to go on the creepiest tirade I've ever heard. I remember almost exactly what he said because I was standing there in absolute horror the entire time while holding a bag of apples. He said, "I just wanted you to know that you don't need to eat salad if you don't want to. You don't need to lose weight. If you're trying to impress that guy you were talking to, you should just go for someone who'll love you for who you are, not someone who would want to change you like that. You're so beautiful." I stare at this man in shock. For one, I eat salads for lunch because I freaking like them. It sure ain't a healthy salad either. Those things are loaded with Caesar dressing and bacon bits. Second of all, I have a boyfriend already. It's not Gavin from customer service, and he's also fat and couldn't care less of what I eat. Third of all, I take offense that some random creep thinks that I, a grown-ass woman, have been waiting all my life to be validated by him, a man who spends all day at Walmart without even being paid for it. Needless to say, I'm horrified and embarrassed because he just said this in front of multiple other customers who are giving us weird looks and pissed off by the audacity of this damn weirdo. I can't tell him any of this though. I stick with telling him that I think that's inappropriate for him to say, and he needs to stay out of employee-only areas like the break room, and if he needs anything else, he can go ahead and talk to customer service. He looks shocked as if this wasn't the nicest way I could have ended the conversation, and I end my pick run early to go talk to a manager. In the back, I tell my manager all about Corn Guy, how he's been following me, and how I'm not going back out to pick tonight unless we know for sure that he's gone. She's understanding and she lets me start dispensing early, and she sends one of the guys in the back to pick in my place. The rest of the day goes okay, except when my coworker and I go out together to take a huge order in one of the spots in the main parking lot, and Corn Guy is sitting on the bench out front. I prayed that he was just waiting for someone to pick him up and refused to take out any more orders to the main lot. I managed to put away returns without seeing him and with minimal trouble. And at 8, I go back to OGP, turn in my handheld and keycard, and say goodbye to everyone left. Now, I always park in the main lot right in front of the grocery section, and as I'm walking, it's just starting to get a bit dark. It had been raining on and off the whole day, and it was the perfect balance of summer warmth and cold rain outside. As I'm unlocking my shitty old CRV, I see Corn Guy approaching me. I'm really scared on what the hell he wants from me, But at this point, I have my keys out and the pepper spray on the chain is clearly visible, so I'm hoping he isn't stupid enough to try something. He walks up to me and starts trying to talk. I shut him down, tell him that he's been following me all day, and that I'm really uncomfortable talking to him. Reminder that he's been at Walmart for a full 8 hours at this point. I also tell him that I'm off the clock, and if he needs something regarding Walmart, he can go talk to customer service. And if he wants to talk to me personally, I'm not interested and he needs to leave me the hell alone. He has the nerve to actually look offended. And then he says something that tops a salad rant in terms of stupid shit to say to a random woman. Okay, well, since you're gonna be like that, I won't ask you out. Ungrateful bitch. I thought you were cool and that maybe you could understand me. But you're just like every other girl. I'm too morbidly curious, so I ask him what the hell that means. I mean, you seem cool. I don't see anyone around here with ears stretched that big or who can appreciate Korn's artistry. I thought that maybe you were on my level, but you're just like every other stupid Midwesterner in this shitty town. At the end of this little rant, he digs in the pocket of his sweatpants and produces the shittiest little switchblade I've ever seen in my life. This pitiful little thing couldn't even skin a hamster. I'm somehow even more offended. First, I've been stalked all day because I have stretched ears and complimented a guy's band shirt. Second, he thinks Korn is some deep cut metal band that nobody else has ever heard of. Third of all, we do live in Iowa, but we live in one of the largest cities in Iowa, and this Walmart is right in the middle of it. And fourth, he's not only threatening me with a knife for not living up to his manic pixie dream girl fantasy, but he thinks I'm going to be scared of that pathetic excuse of a knife. At this point, I'm so sick of this asshole that I get in my car, tell him to screw off, and then slam the door and get the hell out of there. I haven't seen him since, but I work pretty much every day, so I guess it's only a matter of time. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com. or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always